if you were guaranteed an exponentially better life if you faced your deepest fears, would you do it? Our deepest fears. Not the obvious ones that involve various painful ways of leaving the earth, but the ones that touch on the quality of our lives, our tolerance for risk, how well we connect with other people. I wanted to know what fear was. And the definition that made the most sense to me was that fear is anticipation of pain. My deepest fear was that I was unlovable. I was angry with my father for many, many years. And there were even a handful in there where we had no contact. The combination of human error, the perspective of a child, and holding him in this impossible role of my hero. On this particular year that I headed back to England, we were getting used to being back in each other's lives. We were rebuilding trust, and another year had gone by where I'd barely heard from him. He didn't reply to my emails, he didn't email, and he didn't pick up the phone and call me. I, of course, had decided that the reason for this was because I was unlovable. He came over to pick me up for dinner and we walked the 2 blocks to the restaurant. It was Christmas time. He had one arm around my shoulder and he had the other one on his phone. And I remember feeling so relieved that he was on his phone because of the mix of emotions I had going on inside of me. They ranged from, "Daddy!" to, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm just fine. How are you?" to, "So good to see you." to, "Why the heck haven't you called me? Clearly you know how to use a phone." And I didn't know what I was going to do with all of this. And as that restaurant loomed closer, I was aware I had a couple of choices. I could push it all down and pretend everything was fine. Or I could show him the real me. And that was going to involve feeling some very painful feelings and facing my fear of being unlovable. As we arrived at the restaurant door, Dad hung up his phone and we went inside. And as we walked across the room to the table, I ran through my mind some past techniques that I'd used for dealing with conflicting feelings such as these. I could binge on the bread. I could yank the cork out of the wine bottle and down the entire thing. I could blame him for something completely off topic. Now, of course, the real decision that I was facing in that moment was whether to continue with old defensive behaviors or whether to be honest and vulnerable. And this was not an easy decision because I was well practiced in being defensive. Emotional thought patterns, when they're repeated often enough, become neurobiological and behavioral traits. And some of the traits that I developed as a way of managing this fear of being unlovable were things such as isolation, relentless self-blame, pretending everything was fine, being busy, drinking, smoking, and overeating. And some of these had begun when I was really little. We can understand why, as little children, we don't want to feel the difficult feelings, because we're vulnerable. But why is it that as adults we continue to go to such lengths to stay away from painful emotions? Scientists have shown that some of the similar parts of the brain that get activated when we're in physical pain also get activated when we're in emotional pain. So we have a similar response. We want to get away and we want to heal. We worry that if we feel the difficult feelings, they may never end. We worry that if we feel the difficult feelings, we may lose control and do something that we regret. Maybe again. We worry that having these difficult feelings means there's probably something very wrong with us because clearly everybody else is just fine. But underneath these worries, there are two questions that we're asking ourselves. And I invite you to customize these, make them your own. The first question is this: what if I face and feel my fear of being unlovable, and I find out that I am actually unlovable? What then? For some, that's a relief. The second question is this: what if I face and feel my fear of being unlovable, and I find out that I'm completely and utterly lovable? How will I then make sense of leaving my family in England, of the years of no contact, of my overly generous contributions to the alcohol and tobacco industries? What then? So we avoid difficult feelings, and when we do, it blurs clarity about who we are and what we want in our lives. If deep down who we are prefers to ride the bus instead of drive a car, be single instead of married, be an artist instead of an accountant, if we prefer men to women, being a parent to being an executive, if we're concerned that our true preferences might lead us to experience rejection, judgment, or the coming true of one of our fears, there is a high possibility that we will deny them, or will push them so far away that we actually forget what they are. And here's the thing. It's true. The more we become us in our lives, the more the things that don't fit fall away. And relationships do leave when we change. Or they change with us. But what if the reward that we receive for taking this risk is to be surrounded by a community of people that fit us even better, by opportunities that excite us? And what if we finally get to feel the feelings that we've most wanted to feel, but now in a sustainable way? Peace, contentment, fulfillment, okayness, purpose, freedom. And what if the only way to remember and to have the lives that we most long for, and to become the version of ourselves that we most ache to be, is if we put our deepest fears to the test? To stand strong or cower. Cowering works too. As the belief, you are not good enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough, or simply not enough, looms up large and dark in our hearts, threatening to steal away everything that matters to us. And what if in that moment we link arms with the part of us that knows that we're whole and we're loved and we're a little bit neurotic? And we face that fear in the eye as it dances its war dance, with its eyes blazing and its tongue lashing and its arms flailing as it lurches closer and closer, until we can feel its hot, sticky breath on our cheek, and we fear that our hearts might actually explode. And just when we fear that we cannot handle another moment, we do, and then, whoosh, it's gone. Vanished. Face and feel our fears often enough, if only to discover that their bark is so much worse than their bite. and we can no longer live under their grip. I asked my client Christine, what is the purpose of the persona of I'm smart and I've got it all together? She contemplated and then she said this. She said, I carry this persona because I'm afraid that if I let this guard down, people will see that there's something wrong with me because I'm not in a relationship. And as she spoke those words, the pain of that fear intensified inside of her. And I sat with her and held that space. And as the intensity moved, on the other side of it, she allowed herself a deep inhale and said she felt lighter and relieved. And a few weeks later, Christine was not worried about whether there was something wrong with her. She was worried about how she was going to get on some decent dates. Maneuvering through our feelings in a way that releases us from their grip is a skill. And over the last 20 years, I've developed a process called T.U.R.N. that helps people like Christine to develop this skill, to regain clarity about who they are, and then go towards what they deeply want. And the reason that I've done this is because what I've noticed is that rather than develop this skill, many of us will put an enormous amount of effort and energy into trying to control how we feel about ourselves, control how we feel about our lives, and control how other people feel about us. And how do we do this? Drugs, alcohol, food, internet, sex, procrastination, manipulation, avoidance, being very busy and important, to name a few. Sometimes we carry really difficult feelings inside of us and we know rationally that we should reach out and get some support for them, but we don't do it. It almost feels counterintuitive. Society bombards us with these seductive images of heroes and heroines going it alone. There's the classic myth of the lone warrior facing the fire-breathing dragon, and it's inched its way into our psyches. Somewhere along the line, we've internalized shame and needing one another. We've started to think that we're the only ones with the dark, dirty secrets, and we might actually be certifiable. But when you pull back the scene of the warrior with the dragon, you also see the princess he loves, her ridiculously wealthy family, the community that he's saving, and all of this is upheld by a value that he believes in. Even our mythical warrior isn't doing it alone. Now, we do have to walk through our lives for the most part alone. We have to have the difficult conversations alone, make the final decisions alone. But we do not have to face our dragons alone. Here's the other myth. It's not about dragon slaying. It's about learning dragon whispering. And I've noticed that the people that learn dragon whispering find jobs they love, fall in love with their bodies. They start to date people they actually like. Their relationships deepen, their positivity increases, they discover their purpose, and they start to say what they really think. As I pulled up a chair to the table with my father and looked up into his eyes, the tears fell, and I spoke straight from my heart. I miss you. Seeing you once a year with no contact in between is really hard. He looked at me and he said, I thought you were over that. Of course, he meant over him. I said, no. Are you? And he said, no. And that was the beginning of a 5-hour conversation over some really good food. And I asked him questions I'd wanted to ask him for years. and shared with him the impact of him not being in touch had on me. And he helped me understand why that was. And even though there were parts of this conversation that were difficult, they were the truth, and I knew it when I heard it. And the more that we talked, the more these false beliefs just disintegrated. Stories that I carried with me for as long as I could remember could no longer hold their ground. I was starting to think I might actually be lovable. I did think for a while there that having the deep, honest conversations with him might improve his communication frequency, but it didn't. We still go through the year with barely any contact, but I'm almost okay with it. I noticed that as soon as I started being me, it was so much easier to let him be him. As it turns out, this journey with my dad over these years has been the greatest gift he could have given me. Because of him, I changed my fear and mistrust of men into a deep love, respect, and enjoyment. Because of him, I transformed my primary relationship from being with a bottle of wine, a cigarette, and a loaf of bread, to being with other human beings and myself. Because of him, I ran away from England straight into the arms of a New Delhi slum, Romanian orphans, Rwandan villages, and my true gifts and purpose. Because of him, I'm standing here today in front of you, sharing my deepest fear. And he didn't even have to show up to a single therapy session or workshop or letting go ceremony. So for all you budding dragon whisperers that are ready to lay down your swords, it starts with this. Share your deepest fears with another human being. Let's begin to turn this around and normalize this. We clean out our closets. We wash our dishes, recycle our papers, throw out our trash, and we feel better. We feel like we've done something that was good and worthwhile. We check it off our to-do list, and then we're free to think of things that matter more to us, like traveling to Bora Bora, or catching the latest blockbuster, or finding work that's purposeful. And it works the same with the clutter and the muck and the wounds inside of us. It might take a little time, but if you know you've got, or you think you know you've got, another 10, 20, or 30 years ahead of you, is it worth the investment of 1 or 2 of those to ensure that the remaining 8 to 28 or more are going to be really, really good? The more we express and heal the parts of us that fear we're not enough, the more the parts of us that know exactly who and what we are then have the space to express. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Thank you, Marianne Williamson. If you were guaranteed an exponentially better life, if you faced your deepest fears, would you do it? Will you do it?